Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The Outer Hour, where your voice matters.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Outer Hour. It's a special edition tonight. We have got Songezo Zibi on board. I'll introduce Songezo in just a moment. But let me say hello to you quickly, wherever you find yourself in South Africa or abroad. Thank you for tuning in. Remember that your comments are welcome in the comments section down below. We'll be dipping into those comments as we make our way through the show. I'm Tom London. And Wayne Duvenage will be in conversation with Songezo tonight. Songezo Zibi has over 20 years of corporate experience, during which time he's been a corporate affairs professional at the highest level in corporate South Africa. As a journalist, he has written extensively about South Africa's political system, economy, and social dynamics. This year, he announced the launching of the Rivonia Circle, a think tank that will give birth to innovative and more effective ways of political participation in the future. Now, Songezo's latest book, Manifesto, is an outline of what we South Africans need to change to have the South Africa of our dreams, where every South African has a flushing toilet, where every South African has access to a quality education and, by extension, access to the job market. A South Africa that keeps the lights on, and a South Africa that prospers in the future. A prosperous future for all of us. Wayne, it sounds like an exciting hour coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And we're going to feature Songezo's book tonight, Manifesto, in conversation with him. And to all our viewers, welcome. Thanks for tuning into the Outer Hour again. We look forward to a really interesting conversation with a very interesting person, a leader, somebody who I believe has potential to change this country quite a lot. So, Songezo, thanks again for joining us tonight. Your recent book, Manifesto, follows on your earlier book titled, I think you launched that in 2014, titled Raising the Bar, Hope and Revival in South Africa. And a lot has changed since then. And your recently launched book says a lot. We'll go through some of the elements in that. We're going to have a conversation. But your history and your experience in business and journalism and your thought leadership approach to what you do certainly articulates, the way you articulate these matters culminates in somebody, an individual who has the ability to change and drive change and stimulate change in this country. And it is change that we so desperately need to unlock our full potential. And you speak a lot about that in the book. So let's get into the discussion, Songezo. You reflect a lot in the book about what it is we need to see in this country. The first 4 chapters I see is spelling out the issues, the broken promises, the political decay, and how our state has been destroyed by our government or governments since our transition to a peaceful democracy. And I know that anybody who follows the news understands so much of what's gone wrong. But let's start there in the first part of your book, for the first 10 minutes or so. What happened? How did we find ourselves languishing and punching so far below our weight as a nation? Over to you, Songezo, and welcome.
Hi, Wayne and Tom, and then everybody else who's part of this conversation. You guys are incredibly generous, by the way, in how you describe me. So thank you very much. I wish my mother was watching. So, guys, there's a couple of things which have happened. And I think the most serious mistake we made collectively as a country was not to drive a culture of democratic accountability. And someone said to me some months ago that we had magicians in 1990 onwards, in Madiba, in Walter Sisulu, and so on, right? And these were really big personalities. And in a way, part of our retreating away from political participation was because the magicians were in charge and everything was going to be all right. And if you remember, the United Democratic Front dispersed and people went into government and so on. I feel that's the biggest mistake we've made and yielded the public square to organized political groups in the form of political parties. And those political parties have disappointed us, ably assisted by the electoral system that we have, which I think is an abortion. We need to change it and change it fundamentally, for instance. But I think that the fundamental reason why we're languishing, Wayne, because that deficit or that weakness has since had an insidious impact right across our body politic.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And we'll get a bit into the electoral reform space because we've been talking about it. In fact, ATA was amicus to a case brought by the New Nation movement to get the courts to compel Parliament to do its work in this space. There's so much wrong with the people who's supposed to represent us in Parliament being elected in lists in the back doors and corridors of political parties. We know these people not. We don't see them in their constituencies when they're supposed to engage with us. And there's just so much missing. And I think what you highlight and what we're trying to get across in this electoral reform space is that imagine a person, like yourself or Thuli Madonsela and others standing against Joe Peterson or Mosebenzi Zwane in a constituency. Who do you think's going to win? And so political parties, when they have to put forward the nominations in a constituency, are going to have to be a lot more transparent and be held accountable. Let's reflect a little bit on that because you talk about this, this incestuous political system we have.
Yeah, look, in fact, as you were talking, Wayne, I was realizing that one of the reasons the 1994 to 1999 Parliament was so formidable is that the ANC actually didn't draw from its ranks only. It drew from civil society, it drew from community groups and so on. And there was this rich diversity of highly capable and hard-working people that made it to Parliament, made it to provincial legislatures, and took their roles incredibly seriously. I remember reading an article by, I think it was Dr. Dennis Worrell, and he was talking about how scary, in inverted commas, or intimidating, let me put it like that, the ANC parliamentarians were, because they were highly educated, they knew their stuff, they worked hard, they read documents and so on. And in a way, we got lucky, and this system appeared to be working then because you had the right quality of people in there. But I also think that in order to build systems to last, you must also think about the worst case. I think once that worst case came after 2007, when the ANC theft at Thabo Mbeki, I mean, we had problems already with the arms deal before then, right? But things accelerated after 2007, and we were like, hey, this doesn't work. And I want to say as a final point, which is a sort of a real anecdote from the meetings we have in communities. People use the term PTY LTD. They say political parties behave like private companies. They come to us, tell us what our problems are, and then they promise to solve them. And then they ask us to vote for them. And as soon as we do, we never see them. We never hear from them again, but we see them on TV when they're fighting for positions so they can eat. Now, this is what people say. And I think in all fairness, Wayne, when a system is not working, we've got to change it and make sure that it's representative and people elect someone they know and trust. It's really that simple. And to your point, people want someone who's been fighting for them in one way or another. And I can tell you, if somebody said, do you know Wayne Duvenage? People would say, oh, the Eton's guy. And that's what you want out of public representation. in effect.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, Songezo, I think you raised the point that we can see very clearly, and the Zonda report just spells it out, especially since Jacob Zuma came into power, how wrong it can go, and how wrong it did go, and it's been a tumultuous decade. There was change in 2019 in the elections, or in the 2017 ANC election, but the change that we were looking for or hoping for didn't come to the extent that we really needed. Fortunately, though, the brakes were put on. Tom Moyane turfed out of SARS, Sean Abrams out of the NPA, but while there's been some repair and a turning of the ship in the right direction, we don't feel that arc. We don't feel that trajectory to the extent that we need, and we'll get onto that discussion now. In chapter 5 in your book, going into the second part, this is where I want us to delve more deeper into the latter part of the book. Is titled "The Choice We Have," and you start out by saying that 2021 was a pivotal year. That could have defined this country's future, largely because the pandemic had opened up an opportunity for leadership and change, and yet they were missing in action. And it was also the year of local elections, which we saw this dismal turnout, and you reflect on the challenges of coalition politics. So let's reflect a little bit about that and what you mean by the choice we have.
So, if you remember, when we were all scared, and there was this pandemic, and we've been told to leave our places of work and sit at home and so on, and we used to refer to family meetings and so on. That was a moment when South Africans were really, really looking for leadership, where I think we could have been asked to do many, many things, and we would have agreed, because that kind of risk focuses the mind on a single purpose. And that single purpose was the survival of the nation. That's what it was. Right now, I think what is also good in leadership is to use crisis, basically to not let a good crisis go to waste, basically. We lost lots of loved ones. We lost lots of family and friends and so on. It was a tragic time. However, I feel that it was also a moment when we could have carried on the message of helping the country to survive and thrive in many ways. Yeah. But of course, what happened, the people who were so ready and looking up to, embroiled in PPE scandals and so on. And so we lost that moment. And I think part of the reason so many people didn't participate in the local government elections is the profound sense of disappointment that we were ready to be led. In a way, we were ready to submit and so on to a leadership that wanted to do the right thing. So it's a lost opportunity for us as a country, and it was a lost opportunity for our president, and a lost opportunity for the ANC as well. Because if there ever was a time when the ANC's fortunes could have done this again, it was by handling the pandemic impeccably, with compassion, with humility and dedication. And people would have said, wow, these guys have turned over a new leaf in our darkest moment. They have shown up, but they didn't. So I think we missed that opportunity. But I also think that we also have a moment of reflection as ordinary people, which is a democracy is a system of self-government.
Yeah.
And if these disappointments say anything, they say we need to choose differently what we do in this moment, and to say, you know what, this is my country, all of it. I take full responsibility for it, and I will not let any political party or person take it down the drain, not on my watch. And that's the point, the essence of what I'm saying about the choice that we have. I think it's a potentially a huge moment of optimism and national unity again, in any case.
Absolutely. And we need to reflect on that, because, we all hear too often that what can we do? We start building our walls higher. We live in these islands. We moan about the issue. We say we pay our taxes. We shouldn't have to do anything else. And yet, if we adopt that approach and attitude, we will watch this country sail very quickly down the river when actually we have a lot more power than we think we have. And we've got a lot to do because we've got an amazing country with immense potential that we have to realize and unlock. And that's going to happen through active citizenry. That comes across very, very clearly in this book. So, I just want to talk a little bit about, 20 months away is May 2024. That's not a long time. That's the elections.
No.
And we know we think we know what's coming. An ANC that doesn't get an outright majority, coalition governments. This is scary stuff. We've seen how destructive it can be in the local government space. But we've also seen in Europe how coalitions where political parties, or 20% of the vote, have their leader as the president of countries. And it works. I know those are mature democracies. But so with the turmoil and the challenges that come with that, I think there's some exciting time ahead if it pans out the way it might. What are your views on that and the coalitions that are coming, and how do we manage this, because it can get quite messy?
So when it can get quite messy, I think the most important thing to do is to make sure that whatever coalition we have in 2024 is legitimate. In other words, it is trusted by the majority of South Africans. And that is even in a case where it's a collection of parties, or it's an ANC and one or two parties or whatever. It's important that we do that. And in a democracy, the best way of making sure that you've got legitimacy is a very intense contest for the opportunity to represent the South African people. And that means we have to bring millions upon millions of South Africans back into the political space. And later on, we'll talk about some of the work we're doing at the Rivonia Circle to do just that. But it's absolutely important that we bring people back to vote, one. Secondly, to ask as many South Africans as possible to be bold. That is why you and I care so much about this electoral reform issue, because South Africans should really get an opportunity to elect somebody they trust in their local area or in their local region, because that person has been fighting for them. If they happen to be in a political party, the ANC, whatever, great. If they happen to be independent or belong to a civil society organization, again, great. But South Africans must get the opportunity to elect somebody they trust. And I think part of changing the system is to ensure that people can say, now I can come back because I can vote for somebody I trust. That's how democracies become legitimate. I think we need to spend the next 20 months or so convincing, basically building a case for an alternative vision of South Africa. What is that vision and who stands for it? And we use that vision and those priorities as a bargaining chip with political actors to say, you don't stand for the following things, I'm not going to vote for you, I'll vote for somebody who will, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that on that basis, we then drive a massive civic engagement, education, and voter registration campaign. Fantastic. So that people can vote for the change they want to see.
Yes, absolutely. And it is so sad to see what below 45% of potential voters voting in the last elections, the youth missing, and this lack of understanding of this hard-fought right, this freedom to vote that we got is just turfed out the door. Sad that in schools, that final year in school, there's a lack of education around what parliament means, what it means to vote, what your rights are. So we've got a lot of work to do. If government doesn't want to do that work, This is what civil society has to do, and that's what you're talking about. And I want us to reflect, or you to reflect a little bit. Then let's go into what Rivonia Circle is doing, its vision and its plan, because you're doing some really good work out there, and we need our listeners to know more about that.
Yeah. No, thanks, Wayne. So let me start with the work that you guys do at OTA and how you kind of entered the public square. And that was basically to try and fight for the rest of us and use the legal instruments that we have and mobilize the public, but fundamentally to go to the judiciary and say, listen, these guys are taking irrational decisions. This is unjust, shouldn't do it anymore. And you've been responsive in responding to other challenges we've had, such as state capture and corruption and misuse of public funds and so on, and ensuring accountability. And that is one form of fighting for a better South Africa. But ultimately, Wayne, what happens is we then say subconsciously, if Wayne is involved in that fight, that means, things are going to happen. So I can go and do something else, right?
Yeah, right.
It can't work. We can't hand it over to Wayne. We can't hand it over to Lawson Naidu or, Trevor Ngwane and whoever else, that is fighting in the public square. You need ordinary South Africans to do what they can in the spaces in which they are, but also to work collaboratively in order to make sure there is national impact, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the first thing. The second thing is we decided that, look, we complain about leadership. Leaders don't fall from trees, okay? Leaders are people who choose to be responsible in the community and in the society. And many South Africans have got the capability to fight with and for South Africans, but they don't have the space, they don't have the self-belief, they don't have the opportunity and so on. Let's find those people with the public spirit and say, hey, let's figure it out together to see what we can do. So that was the second thing. The third thing, Wayne, is that, talking about what's wrong is important, but you need to know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we've taken a decision early on that we're going to be also in the public policy space to make very proactive proposals based on stakeholder engagement and participation, research, and so on, to make these proposals so that when citizens decide to be active, it is around a set of ideas and it is in partnership with others, so that they're not alone. Otherwise, we say to people, be an active citizen. Okay, so where do they go tomorrow? You don't have if you don't have that option. And that's what we've elected to do as the Rivonia Circle. But in closing, with 2024 in mind, 2026 and 2029 and 2034. The reason all of these timelines are important is that there is no country that gets turned around in 1 year or 2 years. We need to be in it for the long haul. Yes.
Great, excellent point. And sometimes I think we are too hasty. We want to see change tomorrow, and this is a journey. It's good you see that. You have that vision. But is this also what you mean in Chapter 5, where you say the professional class needs to make a decision as well? I mean, they've pretty much been missing in action, haven't they?
Yeah, look, and let's start at the why. Okay, so there was a time, some of the best people I know came from the public service. I can remember the former Deputy Chief Executive of ABSA, Peter Matlare, was in the public service. My former boss, Andy Lesangu, public service. We can go on and on. Captains in listed companies and so on. They came from the public service. There was a time when people took pride in working for the public service. I will never forget, out of all of his jobs in his career, the part of his career that Peter Matlare was most proud of, tears would well in his eyes when he talks about his time in the public service, when he talks about SAPC. He was so proud of it, of the work that he was doing. And he's not the only one. I know many others, right? Now, the question is, do we have that sense of pride So it's not to say someone should not be a professional. Oh, please, by all means, we need professionals, right? But are we working for a national purpose? Are we working for a national purpose, or are we working for ourselves and our families? There is nothing wrong with working for ourselves and our families, but there must always be a bigger purpose. And I think that is the first thing that I say, that I refer to. This national purpose is important. Also because as somebody who comes from a village, Wayne, where I grew up, there were people who really couldn't write their name. They would use their thumb, or they would put an X, right, as a signature, because they couldn't write. And one of the questions I get asked from time to time when I'm back home is, why did we educate you if you can't be the ones that lead us?
Yeah.
Right? And that always breaks my heart, because I was educated by the community. I may have come from my family, but I was a child of the community, and I remain a child of the community. And there's an expectation that the chance I've been given by the community to be educated and to be a professional, I must then do something for the South African community, and not just my community as well. And I think that's one of the things I'm calling upon. And then the last reason is this way, that a nation educates its people so that they can take it forward.
Yeah.
We can't do that by retreating behind walls and only tweeting. We have to be in the public square and take our nation forward, because the poor people of South Africa have been in the public square alone without our meaningful support. And it is time that we became part of the body politic and lent our weight and our skills and so on to make South Africa better.
Absolutely. Lovely stuff. Tom, we're going to come to some questions and comments from our viewers. But before we do that, I just want to reflect a bit on what Songezo is saying, because, in chapter 6, you talk about moral leadership, this new leadership that we so desperately search for, and we've had it, as you were reflecting on leaders that came out of the public service. And I think we tend to tar the whole public service with a brush that equates to the Gwede Mantashes and the Becky Treles of the world, when in actual fact and historically we've had some really powerful people there.
Oh, yeah.
But let's get into this whole moral leadership space, because it's lacking. It just doesn't exist. And it's so sad when you expect this from people who lead under the remit of the Freedom Charter. There is a lack of moral leadership, is there not?
Oh, yes, there is, Wayne. Let me put it this way. If there was to be some effort, let's say in the first years of democracy, and Madiba had said, could all South Africans pitch in with whatever money they have? Please, here's a bank account. We need to invest in whatever. I'm telling you, those who could would have done it.
Yeah.
Okay? Because there was a moral connection between the South African people, the leader, and the purpose for which the money is being used.
Yeah.
When you use the money for amoral or immoral reasons, such as corruption and so on, you then damage this moral triangle or triumvirate between ourselves, the leadership, and the purpose for which money is used. So that is the first thing I'm going to say. The second thing is, we've become a bureaucratic society. Wait, if you look at GBV, it is not going to be resolved through policy. Okay.
Yeah,
we as men have to choose to be different people. But what do we need? We also need a leadership that understands that sometimes we have to do what is called to minister. Yeah. Now, I am reminded of Barack Obama when there was the church shooting in the United States. And he went and he spoke at the church. He did not refer to policy. That speech is still on YouTube. It's really profound. I mean, he broke down and cried. But he appealed to the soul of America. Now, do we have a leadership that is credible enough to appeal to the soul of South Africa on so many things, right? And we don't have it. Now, again, that's not going to fall from a tree. We, the imperfect people, have to wake up every day and try. and we make mistakes. But what we can do is to lead by example. Now, I will tell you, all the people that the corrupt people and their acolytes don't like, that they insult, the reason they don't like them, Wayne, is because they stand for something that is morally right.
Yeah.
And they try and sully them so that their moral standing is weakened in South African society. We must find those people, we must encourage them, we must support them, and we must lift them up and work with them so that our country can be better.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Love it. Thanks for that, Songezo. Tom, let's have a few questions and comments from our viewers and reflect on some of those.
Well, Wayne, here's the first question that we've got, and we're going to put up on screen, and that is from Stella Tsuros-Fanikak, who speaks to the age of our politicians. And Stella says, in business, when people reach the age of 60 or 65, they have to retire. Why doesn't this apply to politicians in South Africa?
Let's reflect on that. And Songezo speaks a lot about the need for the youth to participate. Your views on that, Songezo?
So one of the things I don't believe in is youth leagues and youth brigades and youth this or that, okay? Because these things are a fallacy. It's a form of gatekeeping to make sure that the brightest young people are still not in the right positions where they should be making decisions. I'll very quickly make some examples. When Trevor Manuel became Minister of Finance, he was 37. When Tito Mboweni became Labour Minister, he was 32. I think Togo Titiza was Deputy Minister at 29. Maria Ramos was DG of the National Treasury at 36. Robinson Ramaite was Director General of the Public Service at 29. That is in the first 5 years of South Africa's democracy. Didn't collapse. These people have done exceptionally well, right? And so I also think, though, it's not about forcing the old politicians to retire. That may be part of it, but it's very difficult in a democracy. Otherwise, Joe Biden wouldn't be US president. However, what I call upon, Stella, in my book is for the young people, and I don't regard myself as young. I'm 46. And when David Cameron was 46, he had been British Prime Minister for 2 years, and Barack Obama was US president when he was my age. Okay, so I'm not young. But what we need to do is we need to be bold. I ask for us to be bold and say, you know, Wayne, it's great. You've done very well at Outer. But I want to come and ask you for advice, and you are wearing a hat and fly fishing because you've earned it. Okay? Yeah. I will do the hard work. I will do you know what I mean? So we need to do that because it appears that there is also an expectation that in addition to the gatekeeping, we must be chosen and then put in positions of responsibility. No, we must enter the public square so that Wayne can say, you know what, I can retire now. I think these people are more energetic and so on. So it cuts both ways, Stella. Yes, the old people need to move, but the young people, the right young people need to step into the public square.
Yeah, and not to lose the experience and the wisdom that people with experience have, because when we impart that and become part of the circle, it just makes it so much stronger, I think. Yeah.
Wayne, can I tell you a story to exactly that point? So I wrote a book on the history of the SA Reserve Bank. It's a coffee table book, which was a labor of love that I did for the Reserve Bank. They didn't pay me. But when Tito Mboweni was appointed governor of the Reserve Bank, Madiba did a lot of legwork, phoned other central banks overseas, ministers of finance, and he made all the calls to introduce Tito, made sure that he went to see those people, they met him, they trusted him, and so on. By the time the appointment was made, there was a little bit of noise, but Tito's appointment was welcomed by the world. And he had spent a year under the tutelage of Dr. Chris Stals. So as we do this intergenerational passing of the baton, the reason the Trevor Manuels and these people could become what they are is because The grey-haired people provided the cover for them, right? And they advised and they mentored and so on. And they eventually became the people that became admired across the world. And I think we must keep that culture of doing things that way.
Yeah, lovely. Tom, another question?
Well, here's a question from Leonard van der Leitgaard, or a statement actually that I think is worth responding to. And Leonard says, we've got to the point where I don't think there's a way to recover. We're in a ridiculous situation.
Yeah, Leonard, I'll reflect a bit on that, and let's get Songezo's view. It is tough. We are in a precarious position, and we cannot be ostriches and put our heads in the sand. But let me just say this, that countries have come out of war, of decimation, of serious conflict, of depressions like you cannot believe, economic depressions, and they get out of these situations and they build stronger economies and stronger countries. And if you see it partially like that, our war is this war against internal corruption and maladministration. And it's tougher because we don't hold the reins of leadership and the choices and decisions that government makes. So it makes it harder, but I don't think it's insurmountable. I really believe that we have got so much potential. We cannot give up. We cannot lose hope, and we will get there. I'm sure of that. But Songezo, what are your thoughts on that statement?
So I think this is the time to be most optimistic. And not because we're looking at things with rose-tinted glasses, but because we're making a collective decision to take matters into our own hands as a responsible adult. Now, I can tell you, in this conversation, not just the three of us, but the other people that are participating in this conversation, all of us are at a moment when we have to choose. And South Africa, in the recent past, less than 40 years ago, has done this. The period between 1985 and 1994 was very difficult for South Africa. It was like Durban riots 3 times over every month, if you recall. Army in the streets, shootings, detentions, and so on, including tens of thousands of people who died in the early 1990s to political violence. We came out of it. Why? Because we chose to show up in different ways. And therefore, I'm saying that we need to use this crisis as the point where we once again say, this far and no further, we're taking our country back. And we're going to make sure that it's okay. We refuse to be despondent, because I do feel personally that I was most despondent when I felt I was powerless. I sleep very well at night now. I am more content, not because my country is doing okay, it's not, but because I wake up every day and I meet other South Africans who want to make it work. And I'm like, heck, man, there's too many of us.
Yes.
We can do this. We can do this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the attitude, Leonard, that we have to take, because for the first time in a decade or two, South Africans don't care who's black or white now. Hey, I have never heard so many black people admire solidarity. You know, when we formed AfriForum, when we formed a Rivonia Circle, people would say, "Do what AfriForum is doing, but do it for black people." Now, all people are saying is, we need to have this fighting spirit of trying to extract what we believe is right out of the system and play our part. And I think we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I agree with you. There's some recent research we read that says we are more connected and more tolerant as society and more cohesive than people would like us to believe. I think there are a few populists out there and naysayers who create this picture that we are divided, but we are not as a nation. But just I like where we are at this stage, because in chapter 7, which is titled New Society, you spell out that we came out of this fractured, turbulent past, and we've had the opportunity to build a cohesive and tolerant society, despite our wounds at the time were so raw. So we got off to a good footing, and you talk about this authentic national unity project, and that's what I hear you talking about now. Let's elaborate a little bit more on that, because we need to be authentic as we go down this journey.
Yes, no, thanks, Wayne. And this is why I'm going to be frank with everyone. Now, I've met lots of people, including very senior business people, and one of them said, I think white South Africans must stay out of politics. There's too much baggage, there's too much history, and so on, right? So we had this interesting debate where I was saying to him, I totally disagree with you. I actually think the opposite needs to happen, right? Because then we start normalizing our society. What really matters is what it is that we stand for. And if we stand for things of value to our society, we can really transform our society. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, when the history is the history we have, okay? Yeah. It's littered with wars between black people, slavery, colonialism, and apartheid. It's a mess. It's got everything. It is what it is. Let us own our history. Let's own it, and let's tell it time and time and time again, so that we don't repeat it. It must become normal. I worked at Volkswagen, and at Volkswagen in Wolfsburg, you can still see the factory where the Jewish and Eastern European slaves were enslaved and then shipped off to Auschwitz. Volkswagen have tried to preserve it as it was between 1939 and 1945, right? I think the preservation of memory in that way is a very powerful thing, because all it says is don't repeat history. Don't repeat the mistakes of the past. But it is important then to move forward together. I think what happens is that the history is kind of brought up as a weapon by all of us in different ways, right? And therefore we can't come together. But if we accept it for what it is and say we choose to be different people, then we begin to build. So that is the first thing. And the last thing I want to say, Wayne, so that is the authentic part. The second thing is what binds us together, Wayne. What binds us together are the values in our constitution. I say in the book, I believe that the South African constitution and the soul of South Africa is social democratic in outlook. Justice, freedom, equality, and solidarity. Those are the social democratic values. There is a Nguni word for it. It's called Ubuntu. Okay.
Yeah, we hear a lot of
and those are the values that I think should bind us together. There is nothing wrong with our constitution. We must protect it, we must expand its meaning, and we must use it as a thing that brings us together on the basis of Ubuntu. And I think we can be united behind it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a beautiful vision, and you're bringing together of the values that we should be standing for, without a doubt. And we know about it, and we speak a lot about it, but we've got to live it now. Lovely. Songezo, in chapter 8, you speak about reimagining the state. And in particular, I'd like to get onto this part of Parliament. We recently wrote our book, Elsa Salzwedel wrote our book called Permitted Plundering. It's really around how Parliament failed South Africa. We've spoken about electoral reform, and in that space around how members of Parliament are selected. In this chapter, you reflect on Parliament government, also at a provincial and a local level, as well as the judiciary. But you articulate very well this piece that you wrote in that chapter on citizens' responsibility. And that interests us because we're on this drive as well, even as a civil activist organization, to start empowering citizens with platforms and apps and communication methodologies that get the public to say, what is it that I can do? What is my responsibility? And I think we've spoken a little bit about that, but let's reflect a bit deeper as citizens, because we just cannot sit back. We cannot have this view that it's not my role to fix this country or do anything outside of the boundaries of where I want to play in.
Yes. I've been reflecting on this once more over the last couple of days. And it occurred to me that democratic or collective participation is not just a Eurocentric concept. So where I grew up, in Zwedish location in Mkandul, people didn't have much, but there were three things. One was leadership. Secondly, there was a moral code, generally speaking. And thirdly, there was collective responsibility.
Yeah.
So what used to happen is there was a man called Makaya. He's old now, but he was the village crier, basically. He would go around telling people that there will be an imbizo, and my grandmother and my grandfather would go to the imbizo, and others would go, and there would be a discussion about something that needed to be sorted out. Typically the school, I went to a mud school, so the classrooms were built by the community, and there would be a decision taken that this must happen, right? But it would be a collective. But the leader, the headman, would propose that this is what's going to happen. When on the appointed day, the place would be teeming with people. Nobody is shouting at anyone. It has been agreed by the community that we're going to solve a particular problem. Therefore, that's democracy in a way, because nobody's being coerced to do it. There is just a moral shame of not participating. What's wrong with you? Why won't you participate, right? Now, we don't have to shame people, Wayne. I think the responsibility we have, and it's one of the responsibilities myself and my colleagues have taken upon ourselves, is to make sure that we create these spaces together with others where people are able to have our own self-initiated imbizos, because it is from that you prick the activist spirit and the national unity and so on. And we must do that, because when you've got this groundswell, trust me, Wayne, it won't be too long before the nature of our parliament and the councils begin to change.
Absolutely. And be the parliament that we spoke of in Madiba's days, the tough, robust, questioning parliament that holds people to account. Lovely stuff. And I guess that's a lot of the work you're doing in Rivonia Circle around the country. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yes, no. This is wonderful. We have discussions in urban areas, but most of them are in townships and peri-urban and rural areas. In fact, at the end of this month, we're going to my neck of the woods, down in Matwaleni. We'll have my book launch and a couple of other things. But what we do with Democracy Builder is really to engage people in political conversation that is not party political. In essence, we show that politics is everybody's business. You don't need a T-shirt. You don't need a membership card to any political party. You don't need to be elected. You have a right and an obligation to care about the affairs of your community and do something about it. And you know what? It is incredibly liberating for people, because they used to being addressed by people sitting on the stage on that long table with a tablecloth in party colors. And they must listen and clap and say viva and then go home. No. So what we do is we do the facilitation, but they do the talking and deciding what the priorities are. And people have initiated beautiful interventions right across the country following those workshops, because they feel they own it. Yeah, it's theirs. It's their resolution. Wouldn't it be beautiful, Wayne, if our democracy right across worked like that, where people feel, instead of feeling disempowered, we're going to get together, decide what needs to be done, and we're going to start doing it, and we're going to tell government, you will help us do this thing that we started doing.
Fantastic. Lovely.
Yeah.
That's the democracy we want to see unfolding, and that's the people's democracy. That's working for the people. Love it. We're going into the last 10 minutes or so, and I want to end off with this manifesto chapter and what you see happening going forward. But Tom, another reflection, a question or comment or two?
Sure. Here's one from Juliet Dixon for Songezo. Juliet asks, Songezo, what is the one thing that an average South African without a platform can do to join the efforts to make change apart from voting?
Lovely.
And hi, Jules. I know Juliet, by the way. So I haven't seen her in a while, but I know Juliet. So, Jules, what I always say to people is this. If you don't get in touch with Rivonia Circle, please find an organization that does something that you really care about. Phone them up or email them and say, my name is Juliet Dixon. I want to get involved in your work. Please invite me, right? You will find other people there and invite friends and so on, and just be part of something. Yeah. And when we start collaborating across many organizations, we will be part of a growing and significant national community.
Lovely. You know, we talk about this very often. We are busy. We don't have time sometimes, but support those organizations that are doing this good work that resonates with you, even if it is just assisting them with funding or volunteer time, because they will make the difference. And by doing so, you are an active citizen, without a doubt. Tom, another one?
Well, here's an interesting comment from Lola Strode. It's just 4 words. Learn from the past.
Yeah, you know, we speak so much about looking forward, looking back to go forward. Songezo, your thoughts?
Learn from the past. Don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Do what has worked in the past, but even better in the modern context. And I don't think we'll go wrong. I agree entirely with that.
Absolutely. So, Songezo, let's close off with your closing chapter, manifesto. You know, and you're so right, we spoke about this. There are many ways to fix a country. Civil society has a big role to play, but ultimately, it's the people that go and vote. And you get the government you vote for. We hear this so often. And you know, through the electoral process, through this healthy democracy we have, that is where we can exercise the meaningful change. That is if the electoral reform aligns itself with what has to happen. So I sense in this manifesto title, the question we've got to ask then is this a manifesto for a political entity that you are willing to head up and take to the 2024 elections?
So the manifesto is for all of us. I've called it a manifesto because I want it to be something that we can use to shape a different future collectively, firstly. And so I was sparking a debate with the book itself, with the provocative name of the book, so that we can start talking about different things. I'm tired of Zuma. He must be held accountable still, but I'm tired of Zuma. Let's talk about how we're going to make our country better. So that is the first thing. The second thing is I make in chapter 6, Wayne, right at the beginning, I make this commitment that I commit myself to pursuing every single thing that I say in this book. And I also commit myself to being part of or in the leadership that I am talking about, that I'm saying we need and so on, because I can't ask people to do something that I am not willing to do so myself. So that is the second point. The third point is that 2024 is a pivotal moment in South African life, in our history. And if we get an outcome that is illegitimate because we chose to do nothing, we will blame ourselves for a very long time, right? So that is the third point I wish to make. What I will say is this: the conversations we're open-minded because we want the outcome of those conversations to to reflect the wishes of the conversations that we have. What we are very open to is that collectively we can go into 2024 and have a direct political intervention at the ballot. What we're being careful to not do again is to be this political intervention again, which is undemocratic, which does not seek to do the public good. Let's engage in conversation so that the South African people that we meet can then participate in the decision-making of how exactly do we make this democracy work and shape a different future. If that means participating in an election, absolutely, we must. And I hope that people like Juliet and Stella and Leonard can be people that are on the list going to Parliament.
Yeah, and you. So let's talk
And
about
me.
you and being the president. Is this, you say it, we've seen you say it. If that's what that's what has to be and will be, then you're ready for it. But we've got this political animal arriving this election in 20 months' time, as we say. There's a lot of work that you've spoken about to get the realization by civil society, the public, as to what must change, what must happen, how to be involved. But when you talk about being involved in the Rivonia Circle and where you are going, do we see you in that space? Because I think a lot of people who've listened to you, read your book, would love to see you as the president. Is that 2028? Let's talk about that, because if you say that, you want to be there, I'm sure.
So what I can commit to, Wayne, is that I am having this, all of these workshops and all of this work that we're doing in all seriousness, understanding that the moment of decision is 2024, not even 2026 or 2029, right? We've set ourselves the task of being the convener and the catalyst of this conversation about a political alternative. That's why I am reluctant to talk about myself in the sense of President Wayne, because our objective is to bring not just prominent, but also ordinary South Africans together and say, guys, we need to change the country's trajectory, and that begins with politics. What do we do? And so I'll leave it at that. I know I'm avoiding the question, but that's because I am really trying to be faithful to how we are doing this work of talking to South Africans without patronizing them and saying, I want to be president, so come into... No. We've tried that as South Africans. It ends badly, as we've seen.
Yeah, no, we don't. We're not looking for another Achang or a Cope. I agree with you 100%. But we do know that there's a void. There's this gap. You've got the ANC failing. You've got the DA shooting itself in the foot. You've got a populist party in the FF. And there's this hole in the middle. Some entity with rationality, with vision, with purpose, that the public are largely looking towards or looking for, to say, come on this journey with us and let's vote for an entity that's going to make this real difference, or make this difference so real and make it happen. And that's when, reading your book and listening to you, Songezo, so many people's hope is, becomes stimulated again, because there are people like you out there. But how do we get you into that role? That's where I think I want to leave that discussion today.
No, I understand. I understand exactly. So
there's a lot of frustration.
I know there's a lot of frustration, but all I can say is that what really matters now is that we are willing to be that catalyst. In many ways, I and my colleagues are. That's why we're having these conversations in villages and townships and other places across South Africa. But we must have that conversation honestly, because this is not a time for egos, right? Where we once again see ourselves in leadership positions. The only thing I can commit to now is to be the agent, as I have been. And in a democracy, leaders are elected. So eventually, maybe that would happen.
Well, long may your agency live and grow and thrive, and for this beautiful future, for this amazing country we have. I just want to end off by saying, seeing Leonard's comments, he's totally positive about South Africa. We just need to get this changed sooner rather than later, before it's too late. Di Gibson, once again, a great show, Arta. Always need my weekly outer fix. Great discussion. Thanks for the contribution. Thanks for that comment, Di. I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to close out. And just from myself to you, Songezo, thanks very much for doing the work you do, for coming on the show tonight. I know we're going to engage a lot more. We want to get closer to the work you do as well. We want to bring our supporters on board as well. To our viewers out there, thank you. Thank you for making the difference, for supporting us, for being there and making our work possible. We really cannot do this without you.
No.
Tom,
thank you.
Over to you. Last words first, Songezo. Anything to part with?
My last word again is this is the time to be optimistic, guys. Let's take our country back. Let's find other like-minded people. Let's become a community right across the country, and our country will be great again.
Let's make it happen. Lovely. Tom, closing.
You've been watching Wayne Duvenage in conversation with Songezo Zibi. Remember that Songezo's latest book, Manifesto, is out at the moment at all good bookshops. Go and pick it up. And thank you for your engagement tonight. All the valuable comments in the comment section down below the video. Remember, we'll be back on your screen, small or big, next week at 7 p.m. That's Wednesdays at 7 p.m. if you want to participate in the live show. Until then, I hope you make a bit of money. It's the same wish every week. I hope your health stays good. I hope that people are kind to you and you're kind to those around you. But most of all, I hope you join us next week at 7 p.m. for another date, another outer hour. Until then, I'm Tom London, and I miss you already.
Our fight to eradicate corruption, maladministration, unethical leaders, and the abuse of taxpayers' money by those in power continues. It's fresh, it's fearless, and focused. The Outer Hour, where your voice matters.